talk radio in Southern California specifically, and America more broadly, is virtually unchanged. All day, all night, all white. We make no apologies for our prime audience, but true to the best of our tradition, we're committed to expanding justice and freedom for all. So when we receive messages from listeners like Neil, we just smile.
I realize that I'm not your target demographic, but I love listening to your station as it is the only progressive station on the dial.
That's us. Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm delighted to have you with us today, particularly and especially in this hour that I've been looking forward to with two brilliant sisters who will represent in their own ways. On the B side of this hour, Dr. Mariel Bouquet on breaking the cycle of generational trauma, illuminating pathways to resilience and reclaiming personal narratives. She was on this program the other day, and as you may recall, in the midst of that conversation, the news broke that Dexter Scott King had died at the age of 62 from prostate cancer, and so we had to interrupt that dialogue. But I promised her and I promised you to get her back on this program to complete that conversation. So Dr. Bouquet joins us on the backside of this hour, and I thanked her for her patience the other day when that news broke that I'm still wrestling with, and our thoughts and prayers remain with the King family. But I'm delighted to commence this hour with Harvard scholar turned Peabody and Emmy-winning journalist Antonia Hilton on her new book, her provocative new book, riveting. It's called Madness, Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum. In the book, Antonia traces the legacy of slavery to the treatment of black people's bodies and minds in our current mental health care system. She tells the history of Crownsville Hospital, one of the last segregated asylums in this country. The story is beyond arresting, and I am delighted to welcome Antonia Hilton to this program. Antonia, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Tavis.
No, it's my great delight to have you on. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me start with the backstory here. I'm always fascinated by people who do this kind of work as to why and how they were pulled into this particular space. It's a powerful story. But let me just start by asking, again, that broad question of how and why this story for you.
I come from a very big Black family. I'm one of 7 kids. I have 20-something cousins, and we are all very tight. But growing up, for me and my siblings at least, we felt like the one issue, one topic everyone really struggled to talk about was our emotions and our mental health. Especially for my parents and some of my elders in my family, it was completely off limits. And there was this desire among the younger generation in our family to talk about these things, to try to better understand our family history, our family secrets. So when I became a college freshman and I got the opportunity to study history, I fell in love with the history of psychiatry. And specifically, I wanted to understand what has happened to Black families, Black communities in these systems. And I think I was drawn to that in part because I knew that I had a great-grandfather who was sent to an institution not unlike Crownsville, that I have other relatives who had spent time being locked away for mental health care crises. And that's an experience that I think a lot of Black families have, that they know they have a loved one who's suffered, but there's that stigma, that shame. And I wanted to study it, and I wanted to find a way to talk about it so that our families would have an understanding of why the system is this way. And, what I've found in doing this work over the last 10 years, Tavis, is that it's given me a whole new level of compassion and understanding for why some of the generations in my family struggle to talk about these issues. Because when you see the history up close and you see just how badly Black people have been treated by psychiatry, you truly understand why people have stayed away, why they don't raise their hand, why they don't want to come to these hospitals. It all starts to make sense.
To the latter part of your comment, what, in fact, broadly speaking, we'll get to Crownsville specifically in a moment here, Antonia, but broadly speaking, what has happened, to use your phrase, to Black families in these institutions?
Well, really one of two things. Either they have no access to these institutions at all, they were barred from them, told they can't afford them, and completely excluded by a field that is majority white still to this day. And they, when they try to find providers who look like them or who care about their communities, no matter if you're in a rural area or an urban area, Black patients say they have the same experiences. They're shut out and they can't find people who really care about them. Or on the flip side, they do get access to these systems. They do get inside these hospitals and historically have been abused by them, used by science, subjected to experimentation without their consent, not told the truth by the doctors, mostly white again, who were taking care of them historically, and discarded on wards that were overcrowded and filthy and not up to par with what state governments like Maryland, where this book takes place. But there were institutions like this all over the country, so it's not just Maryland. And they were left there for decades in many cases with no attempt at care at all. So, this book takes you from the very beginning of the darkest days in the early 20th century. The hospital was founded in 1911, but it didn't even close until 2004. And so it's like a century-long history there. And so this is not distant stuff. Yeah. This is living history. We were all alive when that hospital closed, and I think people really need to sit with that.
There's been great conversation, as you well know, about Black America's skittishness. That's one word. I could use any number of others. But our fear of having conversations about mental health. That conversation is as real as rain, but it raises the obvious question for me, given what you have just said and what's in this text, which we'll dive into a bit more in a moment, why any Black family would want to institutionalize a loved one. The book is called Madness, Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum. Everybody's talking about it, and we're talking about it right now with Antonia Hilton on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on! What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
COVID-19 renter protections are ending for City of Los Angeles tenants. Know your rights and these 3 facts. February 1st is the deadline to pay rental arrears for rent owed from October 1st, 2021 to January 31st, 2023. Residential tenants cannot be evicted without a reason or just cause. You have 5 days to respond to an eviction notice from the court. Learn more at housing.lacity.org. That's housing.lacity.org. Be informed. Be protected, be at home.
We all agree that America has a very serious problem.
Okay, KBLA delegation, we need your help as we launch our 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. We would deeply appreciate you going to our KBLA 1580 website and filling out a short climate justice survey, which will help us better serve our beloved community as we build out this campaign. It'll take you just a few short minutes to complete the online survey, and the information you provide us will be invaluable as we do our part to hold folk accountable and amplify the voices of our people in this climate conversation. When you take the survey, you'll be automatically entered to win seats at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. So, hit our website at KBLA 1580. Help us out by taking the short climate justice campaign survey, and you could be our guest at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. Thank you in advance for your consideration and cooperation. At KBLA Talk 1580, we care about the community, we care about the climate. We care about the climate.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties: classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Antonia Hilton, who's author of the new book, Madness, Race, and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum. I want to make the most of our time. I wish we had hours, Antonia. We do not. So let me just ask you to tell me and tell us about Crownsville State Hospital, formerly Maryland's Hospital for the Negro Insane.
Crownsville opened in 1911, but when it opened, the patients weren't brought to a hospital ward. The state of Maryland, Tavis, marched at first 12 black men into the heart of a forest in Anne Arundel County and forced them to build this hospital, this institution that still stands to this day in the center of the state of Maryland. And they had to move railways, they had to clear forests, they had to pour a foundation in concrete and work alongside electricians and contractors and build themselves a hospital before they could even become the patients and get the therapy that they were supposed to receive. Something that never happened to any white patients in the state of Maryland. And from my research, I can't find another example of that happening to a group in the United States. And so I think that tells you very early on in its history how the state viewed Black people and how deserving they were of real mental health care. And even after the patients finish constructing themselves an asylum, they're forced, as I show in my reporting and in the book, to enter a cycle of free labor. And this is, decades after emancipation, but they basically end up back in a plantation structure where all white staff members force them to run a massive, highly productive farm where they have to run the laundry, run the morgue, run the kitchen, and they're serving the white staffers food, not necessarily the other way around. And so you see this place, and in the early photographs, it really looks more like a slave plantation than a hospital. It isn't until the 50s and 60s, after integration, the state is forced to allow Black people to come to work there for the first time, that real change starts to happen. And that's because Black people start treating their neighbors. I mean, literally patients who were their friends when they were kids and rode the bus to school with them, and they start to bring them clothes because they had been refused clothes by white staff. They start to help them wash their hair because they hadn't been properly bathed in years. And they start to investigate their mistreatment and reconnect them with family members so that they can get out of the asylum. And it's those small acts of kindness that really start to transform the place. And so it's this really fascinating story that isn't just your, run-of-the-mill stereotypical story of a scary asylum. It's that pain and the horror, but also these heroes who come every single day. And really, it's a group of young Black men and women, many of whom are still alive and in their 90s today, who just haven't gotten their flowers, who came and did everything they could to save their own people, even as the state continued to mistreat them, underfund them, and give them less support than any of the other white hospitals around the state. And that history, that founding and that injustice haunts the asylum all the way until 2004. It's never able to catch up and to be seen and respected in the same way that any of the other hospitals are, even decades after the technical policies and the practices that were most horrific at the very beginning. Even after they end, the challenges persist. And so this is a story about all of that, the horror, the beauty, the heroes and the villains. And I think it'll make a lot of people who have family experiences in this system, who have felt shut out by it themselves, who maybe are struggling with their own mental health. My hope is that Crownsville's story will be a really American story that makes people feel less alone.
I'm not naive, Antonia, in asking this question, but what does this story say to us about the humanity of Black people?
Well, if you're thinking about that from the perspective of white people, the answer is that they saw us as less than human. And in fact, one of the things I show in the very beginning of the book is how white doctors would write publicly in medical journals and in letters to each other, debating their different theories of the minds and bodies of Black people. And one of their theories early on during slavery is actually that Black people are completely immune to mental suffering because they love their masters and they love spending time in the outdoors, and slavery is so good for them. And then as more and more Black people become free and they are experiencing trauma after enslavement, they change their hypothesis and they say, oh, well, actually Black people can't handle freedom. And they even come up with fake pseudoscientific medical terminology to refer to this so-called disease of Black people that can't handle being free. And that those ideas, those beliefs about Black people inform the decision to segregate them and to keep them away from white patients at all costs. And so you see very much how in the 20th century, the legacy of slavery informs the way that doctors interact with, that they talk about, that they write about Black people. And when you see today that there are still studies that show that white doctors view Black people as being able to handle different levels of pain, as being less deserving of certain pain medications or therapies, you can see the roots of that in a system that said that they're fundamentally different, that they deserve less, and that they're not fully human.
One of the things, and it is frankly one of the primary things that struck me about your text, and this is a huge compliment to you, is that as harrowing a story as you tell, at the epicenter of this story is love. Love of Black people for Black people, love by Black people for other Black people. You raised this issue earlier in telling us moments ago about the ways that this asylum had to change when they finally allowed Black folk to come work there. But just, I wonder if you might just drill down a bit more though on the love story at the center of this harrowing tale.
Yeah, I'm grateful that you picked up on that you felt that as you read the book, because that's a huge part of my heart and why I even embarked on this story, this book in the first place, because I don't want people to just take the horror from it. I also want them to know that their ancestors, that their loved ones that were behind them, that they had immense strength and creativity and ingenuity in the face of all of these things that people tried to do to them. And so I try to tell a lot of the story from the perspective of Black women and men who were patients or who were nurses and doctors working with patients and transforming the medical field firsthand. I tell the story of one woman who's still living in her 90s now, named Marie Goff, who comes into the hospital. She's one of the first Black women allowed to come work alongside the white people. And she starts doing everything she can to bathe patients with her own hands, and she brings washcloths from home. She starts cleaning because the staff has been refusing to hire people who would clean up the asylum, so it's terribly filthy. The stench is horrendous, and she just starts bringing dignity and humanity to patients. Then I tell the story of a patient named Sonia King, who comes to the hospital in the midst of a terrible psychiatric crisis. And she's saved not by medication, not by an experiment or a therapy, but because there are a bunch of Black women who happen to work there, who grew up with her, who wrap their arms around her and show her love every single day. And they walk with her outside and they call her parents and keep them updated on her recovery. And it's that kind of community that I try to show in the book can make all the difference in mental health outcomes for the Black community. And it's part of the reason so many suffer now, because if we don't talk about what we're going through, and if we don't have doctors who look like us and love us, it's really hard to find that nowadays.
What's your hope for how this story about Crownsville will challenge us to rethink race and sanity. I say all the time on this program that at our best, we are a show that's about challenging folk to re-examine the assumptions they hold. We try to help folk expand their inventory of ideas. But it seems to me that this book, which is a polemic of sorts to me, is a way or is an opportunity for us to rethink the notion of race in mental health, the notion of race and sanity. How might we best do that as a society?
I think there's a few things. The first is I think people should look really closely at the ties between the mental health care system and the incarceration system, prisons and jails. In many communities around the United States, California has a lot of them. Your local primary provider of mental health care services is a jail or a prison instead of a clinic or a hospital. And if you are a certain type of person, you're more likely to have interactions with cops and courts instead of therapists and healers. And if we want something better than that, if we want to imagine a better world, or we want to ask our local leaders to support programs that would change that outcome, this book, my hope is that it helps you see the roadmap, where all of this went wrong, why the system was built this way. And I'd argue that in order to know what to do in the future, how to fix things going forward, you need to know your history. And then I think on an interpersonal level, my hope is that this book reminds people that just because so much of mental illness is a mystery, there's a lot about the biology or the genetics that we're still learning. It doesn't mean you can throw your hands up and just say, okay, well, I guess we're just going to have these crises. We're going to have Americans who live out on the streets and who, suffer very publicly. The book shows you in the work of these Black clinicians and nurses and doctors that if you build better communities, if you have parks and safe spaces and safe schools and funding for these things, that you can mitigate people even having to develop mental illness. You can solve a lot of the child mental health crisis that we're seeing in this country right now with better community supports. And so I don't want people to throw their hands up. I want them to read this book, the painful and the beautiful parts, and to know that they could wake up tomorrow and fight for things, or even just integrate new actions, new levels of kindness and patience for others in their own day-to-day actions that would make our country a better place and give Black people, the mental health care system they deserve.
Here again, no naivete, Antonia, but why do you think that link exists, and for that matter, persists, that link you spoke of a moment ago between mental health and our carceral state?
Well, what we see happen toward the end of the book and toward the end of the 20th century is that the government starts to shut down asylums like Crownsville all around the country and push patients out to community mental health care. And they promise that they're going to build all these clinics, but they never do. And what we see happen is that communities welcome back white patients, and white patients who have more money are able to go see private doctors and get the medications and the help that they need. But for Black families and for poor Americans, the system is not there to help them out. And so they're pushed out of the hospital, and who comes to pick them up? The police. And I show there's this messy period toward the end of the 20th century where Crownsville is starting to shrink, but it's still open. And the police are starting to bring people to Crownsville who aren't mentally ill at all. I tell a story of a 6-year-old boy who gets brought to Crownsville by multiple police officers in a car. And he arrives and he's wearing a karate uniform. And the staff are like, what's going on here? And it turns out that he misbehaved in karate class. So the police picked him up, a 6-year-old, and brought him to an asylum full of adults. Think about that, what that says about the way that those systems see young Black boys and the way that they see, the mental health care system in the first place. And I ask in the book for people to wrestle with this. What's the difference between the world telling you that you're incurable, that you're a patient and that you deserve to be locked up in an asylum? And what's the difference between that and being told that you're irredeemable or you should be behind bars and you're a criminal? And in what ways have these definitions actually been mixed up? And how does that affect Black people all across our country?
We got 2 minutes left here. Here's my exit question. given the historical narrative that you lay out in this book, Madness, Race, and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum, given that story, why would any black family these days choose to send a loved one to one of these institutions? Is there evidence that suggests that they've gotten better?
Well, most of these big institutions, of the size that Crownsville was, with at one point almost 3,000 patients living in it, most of them have shut down. And so in most of your local communities, there are the emergency room, there's some clinics or group homes where you could send a loved one who's suffering. But often we hear that there are investigations and scandals that happen in those as well. That's why I am telling this history, because I want people to imagine something better for us, but really for everyone. This is a system that has left more than just Black people with nothing. And that should outrage us. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think the best thing that Black families could do right now is talk more about their mental health, about their mental well-being, create trusting relationships through generations so that your young ones, your grandkids, have the confidence and the trust to tell you if they're struggling, as so many young people are struggling right now, because that's the best way to stop and that early identification of someone who's struggling and suffering. That can make all the difference so that that person never ends up in an emergency, never ends up in a place like Crownsville. And so those lines of communication, until our politicians take action and they change and they fund the larger system, that communication is the piece that the Black community can control right now. And so it's one of the reasons I write about my own mental health and my family's experiences in the book, because I felt like, all right, if I'm going to ask other people to talk more, I should share my story. I should put my heart out there, and maybe it'll make other people feel confident enough to share their stories too. Black America, and indeed this country, owes Antonia Hilton a debt for doing the hard work, the heavy lifting, the righteous work to bring forth this story of Crownsville State Hospital, formerly Maryland's Hospital for the Negro Insane. The book is called Madness, Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum. Antonia, thank you, congratulations, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this on this program today. All the best to you. Thank you so much. Good to have you on. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is still talking with council members to try and convince them not to override his veto of a controversial policing bill. Adams says the How Many Stops Act would force officers to spend more time filling out paperwork and less time policing. The African-American mayor says the bill requires officers to fill out 1 to 3 minutes of paperwork for pretty much every interaction, whether it's criminally relative or not. A new camera has been invented that allows people to see the world through animal vision. According to a report out this week, a team of British and American scientists have come up with a camera that records video in 4 colors, including ultraviolet, which is outside the range of human perception but can be seen by birds. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Temperatures getting low, but demand remaining high? You need Indeed. Their all-in-one platform helps you attract, interview, and hire candidates all from one place. And Indeed's interview tool lets you schedule and conduct virtual interviews right from their website. Visit Indeed.com/credit.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
This was a move Chargers owner Dean Spanos had to make. There was no way he could prepare his franchise for next season without hiring Jim Harbaugh as his new head coach. The Chargers ranked 14th in attendance this season while operating in one of the nation's top 3 population markets. With the Rams coming off a playoff appearance and looking like a playoff contender next season, Spanos needed Harbaugh to keep pace with the Rams and restore a fading fan base. The Chargers are certain to sell more season tickets with Harbaugh coming in with a winning culture. He led Michigan to the national championship. When he coached the 49ers from 2011 to 2014, he took them to the NFC title game 3 times and a Super Bowl. His starting quarterback on that Super Bowl team in 2013 was Colin Kaepernick. A new era has come to Chargers Nation. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Got me a damn girl on my team. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe we have the best tag team in morning radio. Dominique DePrima and Tavis Smiley. As the first black woman in Los Angeles to anchor a morning drive talk radio show, Dominique covers local politics like a blanket. Weekday mornings from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. At 9 a.m., Dominique passes the baton to Tavis Smiley, who talks to everybody about everything every day until 12 noon. KBLA's dynamic duo, Dominique and Tavis. It's no wonder the LA Civil Rights Department is honoring Dominique DePrima this year at its Tell Our Story honoring black journalist leaders and storytellers event, Thursday, February 8th. Or that the John M. Langston Bar Association of Los Angeles is honoring Tavis Smiley at its 47th Annual Installation and Scholarship Awards Gala with its Community Impact Award on February 10th. We couldn't be more proud of Dominique and Tavis, who make black history every day, not just in February. If you're missing Dominique and Tavis weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your black. Holla, yeah!
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice. Continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of this light of ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This light of ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This light of ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
My ride smells just right, just right, just right, just right.
Y'all gotta try that Febreze car.
Just right, just right, just right. La 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 la. With up to 40 days of consistency on low Febreze car clips right on your vent. You know my car's my happy place. Keep that smile on my face when it smells just right, just right, just right. Yeah, breathe happy Febreze. La 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 la.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
It is indeed, and I'm delighted to have you with us in this hour. I told you it'd be a powerful hour with these 2 brilliant sisters. We just finished an amazing conversation. I'm seeing all your messages and all your posts about that dialogue with Antonia Hilton for her book Madness, Race, and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum. 2 footnotes to that conversation, and we'll move to the second part of this great hour with Dr. Mario Bouquet, One, you heard you heard Antonia mention at the top of that conversation, the author of that book, Madness, that she has a whole lot of cousins. Indeed, she does. One of those cousins, who's also Harvard trained, as is Antonia, is a woman named Soledad O'Brien, who was just on this program last week. So if you know Soledad O'Brien's work, you see it runs in the family, obviously. Both Harvard trained, as I said, both brilliant in their own right. So Antonia and Soledad are cousins. A footnote for those who care about those sorts of factoids. I find it fascinating, and both on this program a week or so apart. The other thing I want to bring to your attention as a quick footnote, you may recall this conversation we had on this program some weeks back about Pauli Murray. There's a wonderful documentary out about this great black woman, this great lawyer, first black woman to graduate from Howard Law School in a class of all men, and she graduated #1. You'll recall that story. Thurgood Marshall later ended up using one of her arguments that she wrote about as a student at Howard Law in the Brown v. Board case. And so Pauli Murray, this brilliant black woman who went on to become an Episcopal priest and just did so much amazing work. Again, there's a book out about her. There's a documentary now running on, streaming on one of those services right now about Pauli Murray. And it turns out that Pauli Murray, her father was murdered by a white security guard at Crownsville State Hospital. Just connecting some dots for you. So if you recall that Pauli Murray conversation and all that she was able to accomplish in her life, her father, which she writes about in her memoir, was murdered at this same Crownsville State Hospital, formerly Maryland's Hospital for the Negro Insane, that we just talked to Antonia Hilton about. So for those who listen every day, and I hope that's you, and you will appreciate, I hope, the connecting of those dots between different guests. Antonia to Soledad and Pauli Murray to Crownsville, are written about by Antonia. It's just amazing to me sometimes how all the dots on this show connect. I digress. I am delighted now to welcome back to this program, as promised, Dr. Mariel Bouquet. She was on this program the other day, and while she was on the air, the news broke that our friend and brother Dexter Scott King had passed away at age 62 from prostate cancer. So that conversation got interrupted, but she fits nicely and perfectly into this hour, given the conversation we just had with Antonia. And I am pleased to welcome Dr. Bouquet back to this program to talk about how we navigate this labyrinth, these corridors of generational trauma, and how we then illuminate pathways to resilience and reclaim in this year our personal narratives. Dr. Bouquet, good to have you back. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Tavis. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be back in conversation with you.
I'm glad to have you back. And again, I appreciate your patience the other day while we were dealing with that breaking news. But let me just jump right in to make the most of the time that we have here. Again, you just heard me say that we were just delving into this amazing story that everybody's talking about, this best-selling book about the ways in which they maltreated back in the day black people in these asylums. That's, again, part of our story of trying to navigate all this generational trauma. So let me just start with a broad question. In this American moment, what say you about the ways that black people are still subjected to traumas and how we navigate our way through all of that?
Well, you know, the everyday trauma of being black in America, but really in the world, right, you know, is very much a part of our lived experience just as a collective. So, you know, going about life and being hit with any kind of discrimination, whether it's interpersonal or systemic, is the general status quo that we still exist in, right? Perhaps not to the extent that we have suffered in generations past, but it still is very much a present-centered experience for many of us. And so, you know, when we're talking about generational trauma, as I had kind of alluded to just a bit in our previous conversation, we're talking about compounded trauma. We're talking about the ways in which our nervous systems, our cellular memory, are remembering those experiences of the past that our ancestors had gone through. And so compounded on top of that, we also have the present day experiences of watching our community members being murdered by police, or understanding that we have to have fear when we go into a mental health facility because we're not going to be treated with the level of humanity and respect and dignity that we deserve, or that our white counterparts get treated with. And so there's a lot that, you know, we kind of always have to navigate that is related to trauma, but it's always in relationship with what has happened to generations past.
Yeah. it begs the obvious question for me, which is how one even approaches the notion of living a full and vibrant life if all of that is coming at you in real time, to your point, compounded on the stuff that happened generations before. How does one even approach the notion of living a life that is rich and full, vibrant and meaningful with all that coming at you?
Well, I think that Black people are really the prototype for how you do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how have we been able to exercise joy and be the vibrant, thriving community that we still are and always have been, despite the enormity of suppression, societal suppression that we've experienced as a whole, right, as a people. And so, in part, we have to lean on what has already worked. We have to look at the ways we've already been able to garner joy, but we have to also grow in our consciousness and understanding that we have to go above and beyond that. We have to be very intentional about the joy that we intersperse into our day, into our every hour even, because on any given day, any given minute that we walk this earth, we could be targeted, whether it's, a target that could threaten our life or a target that perhaps threatens our sense of safety or security or emotional wellness, right? Mm. But still, there's always the possibility that something can happen that can actually suppress our joy. And so we have to be that much more intentional about supplementing our lives with abundant joy each and every day.
Yep. Tell me more about that. I hear the prescription. I hear the advice you're offering that we have to be more intentional. But how do we live lives that are more intentional on a daily basis? What's your best advice on how we go about doing that, accomplishing that task?
Well, one of the things that we have to do, which is very antithetical to the ways that we exist in modern day society, is that we have to engage in more mindfulness. Mm-hmm. And mindfulness doesn't have to be like an active practice of just sitting and meditating. It could simply be being in the moment, away from our phones, and really capturing what's in front of us. If we're, let's say like we're at a game night, really getting into the game, not looking at your phone, not worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, what happened yesterday, but just being in the moment and really honoring the joy that's in front of you and taking that in. In today's day, we have so much distraction that it actually, there's a lot that's happening hormonally around the daily dopamine hits that we get from a lot of the stimulation that's around us. And that's actually really unhealthy for us. So the pure joy, the mirroring effect of even like our mirror neurons being activated when we're seeing another person that looks like us and is smiling in our face and is really like, just like having a full belly laugh about what somebody said during the game. Those are the moments that we have to take in and really sit with and savor. And so a part of the prescription is that mindfulness, but the mindfulness that's already baked into the day. It doesn't have to be an added thing that you have to, kind of like check off the list. It just has to be a reorientation to how you go about your day.
I was just speaking moments ago about the way the dots connect on this program. So you hear Dr. Bouquet talking about mindfulness and how we have to be intentional to open up that dopamine, get those dopamine hits that we need to help us live lives of joy and meaning. You see where I'm going, right? If you listened yesterday to the first hour, you heard that powerful conversation about the book called Dopamine Nation with Dr. Anna Lemke. If you missed the first hour yesterday, you must go to our platforms and get the podcast of that conversation about dopamine. It's called Dopamine Nation, New York Times bestselling book. Anna Lemke is the author of that book. We were just talking about that yesterday, and there's some really interesting parts of that dialogue about Black folk and dopamine. So when Dr. Bouquet, that word dopamine came out of her mouth, Miles, my boy, and I looked at each other and started grinning. We just discussed that yesterday. I recommend that conversation, as I recommend the rest of this conversation with Dr. Mary Bouquet when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Interrogating and unpacking. That's what we do around here. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Did you know there's dust floating around your home?
Really?
Yeah. Dust starts on hard surfaces like shelves and ceiling fans. And when you walk by, dust starts to move, compromising the quality of the air you and your family breathe.
So, what do I do?
Get Swiffer Heavy Duty Duster. Swiffer Heavy Duty Duster is the fast and easy way to trap and lock dust.
Before it gets into the air.
Exactly. So you can just... Swiffer Heavy Duty Duster, proud partner of the American Lung Association.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, as the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black history. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyaudio.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyaudio.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Dr. Mary Bouquet, I assume, given the work that you do, that you believe that it is possible to break the cycle of generational trauma. Yes?
Absolutely. I've seen it time and again, and I've seen it really even in my own family, but most definitely within my own therapy room.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about how you've seen that work.
You know, one of the most powerful ways in which I've seen the work actually take place has been when I've actually worked with families. Mm-hmm. So I've worked with teenagers who, of course, when we're working with kids, we're also working with the parents. And being able to actually bring in interventions that the entire family can do, being able to bring in that mindfulness that we just talked about, or talk about some of the things that have been kept in the family closet of secrets, right? And just like bringing them out into the open in an age-appropriate way, but in a way that actually destigmatizes everything that's been happening and the depressive episodes that somebody may have been having that no one wants to talk about because we just don't talk about it outside of the family. And really offering an opportunity for some of those conversations to be destigmatized and unpacked for the family as a whole is really powerful. And some of what I've seen happen, I'll speak to body language, especially for like teenagers, which, you know, as we know, like sometimes they can be a little bit tough to engage, especially if they themselves have suffered trauma. But I've seen a teenage girl actually transition from completely recoiling into herself and like having her entire hoodie over her head into actually being a vibrant child and emerging adult that relates well to her family, that has an opportunity to have open dialogue, that feels like her family, especially her parents, are trusted humans that she can actually lean on, and also feeling that whenever life gets to be overwhelming, which it will, that she actually has tools in her back pocket that she can pull out at any time to help herself, to soothe herself, to bring herself back to balance. And that's a source of empowerment for anybody, whether it's a child or an adult. We feel like we have something that we can lean on so that we don't feel like we're pummeled from all the things that can happen in life.
I'm glad you said that, because in our remaining moments, I want to come right to that point. And this is one of my great concerns. And obviously, it's a greater concern for you because what you do every day, Dr. Mario Bouquet. But it's the concern that I have about our babies, about our young people. And I'm going to, when we come forward, just run 3 or 4 things that hit me as you were talking about the ways in which black boys and black girls are being traumatized in real time, literally as we speak. The trauma that is being visited upon young black boys and young black girls. I wonder what impact that's going to have years from now. And I'll unpack that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
For all the freedom-loving folk, this is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like freedom. If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chuchas Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
I started vaping my freshman year of high school, mostly because all my friends had vapes. I wanted to fit in with them and look cool and be a part of everything that they were doing. The hardest part about quitting for me was all my friends still hitting their vapes right next to me. It was really frustrating and confusing when I was trying to quit because in my head I knew I didn't want to do it anymore, but for some reason my brain still wanted it.
No quit story is the same. For free support, text Kick Nicotine to 66819 today.
Who do you trust to get at the truth? Tavis Smiley. That's who. The conversation continues right now.
Got about 4.5 minutes left in this dialogue with Dr. Mario Bouquet, which I've enjoyed immensely. We've been talking about the ways in which we can better navigate the generational trauma that many have been subjected to, and how we can sort of illuminate some pathways to resilience and try to reclaim our narratives, our personal narratives in this year. I want to close on this note because you sort of teed it up nicely for me, and that is my concern about the way that we are seeing in real time the traumatization of our babies, of our black boys and our black girls. We heard Antonia Hilton tell us at the top of this hour, as we talked about her book about Crownsville State Hospital, about a 6-year-old boy years ago being taken to an asylum with adults, 6-year-old black boy being taken to an asylum with a bunch of adults because he got in some trouble in a karate class. That was way back then. In real time, you can see it on YouTube. You can see it on the internet any day, almost every day. Some other video of some black boy, some black girl being arrested in school by police in the 2nd, 3rd grade. I could do this all day long. Say nothing of the way the pandemic has impacted their lives. Say nothing of the videos that they see of the murder of George Floyd, et cetera, et cetera. You take my point. I give the last 3 minutes to you. What say you about the ways in which all the stuff I just laid out, plus, impacts their lives in the years to come?
Well, the numbers definitely don't lie, and they're looking very dismal for our children, right? And we have to act fast because right at this moment, we're seeing the most alarming rates of suicide attempts and completion with Black boys and girls, and the population of Black boys and girls being very far disproportionately impacted by trauma, by depression, by anxiety, much more than their peers. And it is in large part to the very things that you just mentioned, like this world is traumatizing our children. And we're talking about trauma that is compounded because this world also traumatized their parents, their grandparents, and their ancestors. And so part of what we need to do, the duty that we have as the adults in this world, is that we have to think about very concretely how we start taking action and continue taking action, really, toward creating a better world for our children. And in part, it's because there was one study that was done recently. I think it was just centralized in New York City, but a qualitative study that was asking some of the youth of New York, what are some of the things that are contributing to them feeling a sense of sadness, a sense of worry? And many of them answered in respect to the world that they exist in and feeling like the world that they're being offered is one that is dismal, is one that is filled with chaos, and they don't see how they can actually build a future in this world. And then a lot of their thoughts go into a dark place, into a place that questions why even continue, right? And so it's really important for us to have conversations with our children about the world that we're hoping to co-create for them, but then also have conversations with them about their emotions and really help them orient around their emotions in ways that can actually be sustainable. Give them those back pocket tools that they can actually pull out whenever they're feeling like the world is overwhelming them or they're feeling like trauma symptoms are surfacing.
Dr. Mary Bouquet's book is called Break the Cycle, A Guide to Healing Intergenerational Trauma. Once again, it's called Break the Cycle, A Guide to Healing Intergenerational Trauma. What a great hour. We started with Madness, Race, and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum by Antonia Hilton, and we closed this hour with Break the Cycle, A Guide to Healing Intergenerational Trauma by Dr. Mary Bouquet. That's spelled B-U-Q-U-E with the little accent mark over it, which I love. Dr. Bouquet, congratulations on all your work and witness. Thank you for the conversation. Good to have had you on this program. All the best to you.
Thank you. Same to you.
More Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Of going on a killing spree in southwest suburban Joliet, Illinois, is charged